The Skripal Files, written and read by Mark Urban. Introduction. The situation that presented itself in March 2018 was one quite unprecedented in my 30 years as a writer. A former Russian spy for MI6 was lying in a coma, having been poisoned by a nerve agent, and the world's press had descended on a small city in the south of England. The man at the centre of all this was someone I'd not only met, but spent hours discussing espionage with. He had not been giving me an interview as a journalist. I felt confident he would not have wanted everything blurted out over the airwaves. He had seen me because he knew I wrote books, and I wanted to do one about post-Cold War spying. By the strangest turn of fate, back in 1988, I had embedded in a Soviet regiment on operations in Afghanistan that he had previously served in. As our conversation started, it was apparent that he knew some of the officers I'd met on this assignment well, and this seemed to put him at his ease. The interviews I'd done with him in 2017 assumed a particular narrative, in which a spy swap that took place in Vienna airport in 2010 was central. This was the moment that the former Russian intelligence officer, convicted of spying for Britain years before, had been pardoned and flown to the West. Roll on several months to March 2018, and everything was looking very different. Worldwide interest in Sergei Skripal had exploded. Who was he? How had he ended up in this incongruous street in an English cathedral city? For a while, everyone wondered whether he'd survive. Then, later, whether he would simply disappear without ever speaking publicly. Either way, there was a fascination in his story. I felt I had to tell it. Suddenly, the wider narrative that I had been researching when pursuing Plan A before the Salisbury poisoning, that of an East-West spy battle that had barely slackened after the end of the Cold War, seemed much more relevant too. The result, setting Skripal's life and the poisoning into this context, is what follows here. There were many dilemmas along the way, not least whether it was right to do this, when there were quite a few issues that I wanted to discuss further with Sergei before pushing ahead. He chose not to speak to me after the poisoning, and doubtless he had many more important matters on his mind. I must therefore take full responsibility for any errors in these pages. To those who worry that a book like this will inevitably give too much away, you must remember that Skripal was interrogated for 2 years by the Russian counterintelligence people and then put on trial. The outlines of a career as an agent for MI6 that ended 14 years ago are already very familiar to the Kremlin's secret servants. My aim is to share some of this knowledge with the public. As for those who believe that this text is too coy in places, or the product of some cosy relationship with our own agencies, the Salisbury events should remind you that lives are indeed at stake. There are also many things in this account that Western intelligence agencies would have preferred to keep quiet. The experience of previous books about the intelligence world and special forces has taught me that there are some people who would rather these stories were never told, and others who regard anyone who talks to those in the secret world complicit in some sort of conspiracy. None of these judgments are easy, but there has already been an enormous amount written on this case, and there are reams more of it to come. It's that someone who has at least met Skripal and followed the intelligence battles of the last 30 years should be writing this. Who knows, one day Sergei or his daughter Yulia may write a book also. In order to avoid endangering people, I have observed some basic rules. Certain people who appear in this book are given pseudonyms, and I'll say that by saying this is a pseudonym just at the time that they're first mentioned. In cases where intelligence sources might be involved, I avoided asking questions about them, still less speculating or hinting at their possible identity, and I've respected the stipulation made by many who gave me information that it should not be attributed to them. Having faced dilemmas over telling the story, I then had to write it, producing a manuscript quickly in a number of languages while keeping going with the intensive demands of my day job. In this, I am very grateful for the support, understanding and insights that have come from my editors, principally Christiana Bernhardt and
Sample complete. Ready to continue?